So I've entitled this course The Radiant Core. So I'd like to speak a little bit about that. In each class we'll unfold a little more, not so much systematically, but spontaneously. And as I begin, one of the things that immediately appears to me is the relative difficulty of pointing out to people what I mean by the radiant core. It's a lot easier to write the name in the title than it is to point out what I mean. It would be easier if the radiant core were a something somewhere I could point you to. I can point you to the breath. You can find the breath. You can find the sensations in your nostrils, your upper lip, the abdomen rising, maybe even the chest rising if it's a really deep breath. You can find that particular form, those particular sensations. And it's easy to instruct the attention to aim at something that is a form. And so the difficulty lies in the fact that what I'm referring to as the radiant core is not an object like that. It's not something that attention can make its focus in the same way that it can make the breath a focus, or listening a focus, or seeing a focus. All these concrete experiences of form. And so right at the heart of experience is something easy to overlook, precisely because it is formless. It can't be objectified. And I'm constantly experimenting with words for this. Awareness works. Sort of, every word works a little bit, kind of lamely. We'll start with awareness. That experience of whatever source, whatever source, is arising in this space of knowing, which we are. And yet that space has no content apart from the things that arise in it. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the thoughts, the moods and states of mind, they all are passing and passing through it. I was, kind of reflecting on what a weird thing time is. This is March 9th, 2021. And probably, even if this is recorded, the next time you listen to the recording is likely to be a different date. It's going to be a different day. And even the words that come out of my mouth are gone. Almost the moment that I say them. They're gone in experience. We have the ability to kind of hold on to them a bit in memory and keep processing them, but the actual words, the actual sounds are just gone as soon as they're uttered. It's like this one-way passage of things we call time. It goes towards what we call the future and disappears into the past. We use these words to try to describe such an intimate experience. And yet the core that I refer to is actually not any of this. It's what all of these things happening are passing through. the deep time of our being is always now. Wherever an experience is being met and known is now. You know, and somewhere, if you've hung out in meditation circles, you've heard the old "be here now" saying, which almost has taken on a certain triteness. But it almost sounds like something you're supposed to do, be here now. And yet what I'm actually suggesting is that it's what you are. It's the actual home that is where you have been and lived in and are in every moment of experience. So take a moment as I'm talking about it to just feel into and acknowledge it. It's really helpful if you don't try to think too much about it. The thought energy is just too contracted. Much better if you come down into the chest and the abdomen and you feel in noticing this space of here and now. As soon as I notice it, there's this sense of things broadening out, widening out. And there's no sense of an edge or an end. Check that out for a moment. See if you can recognize what I'm pointing to. It's really what's noticing. It's what's looking out of the eyes. It's what's hearing in the ears. It's what's feeling in the body. And yet it's nowhere. And you really have to relax the thinking mind to just notice it. And maybe it's just a glimpse. It's not something you can hold on to. It's not something one can just focus in on. It comes with relaxation. So in addition to this broader sense of awareness, we are embodied totally too as beings. And we'll be talking about this in the class. I sometimes talk about awareness as like the space of the room that you walk into, and it doesn't argue with anything that walks into it. In some sense, that's the sense of awareness as space, but there's also the sense of it as core. I'd like to just talk a little bit about that, because that has to do with something which is of the nature of energy. Also difficult to point to. It is a bit more of the world of form, however. Sometimes people can feel energy movement in themselves. You know, in some classes I've used the space between the palms as a way for people to feel the flow of energy. Tonight, for this class, talking about the radiant core, take a moment, maybe close your eyes. Feel the whole body. And look for where aliveness is. It's a bit of a shift from looking for concrete sensations. Where is aliveness? And see if there's not some helpfulness of the word radiant to describe this aliveness. The light is on in the body. The light of attention. And there is this buoyancy. There is this energy that is as much body as the physical body. Just get a glimpse of it. And be really merciful with yourself here. I know sometimes people get frustrated if they just don't immediately know what I'm talking about, and you feel like you're the only person in the class who's not getting it. And that's really just a part of you getting in the way. That's a part of you that's always worried about yourself getting in the way. Just pat that on the back, invite it to kind of sit down next to you, and just have a sort of open, playful exploration, and not worrying about getting it, not worrying about, do I know what he's talking about? And again, just feel aliveness, whatever that is. It's subtle, it's not. And you may notice vibration, you might notice flow, you might notice these phenomena. It's not quite reducible to that, but they're in it. Aliveness is in it. And at least as I experience the body, again, sometimes I'm not always sure how universal this experience is, but I tend to find that people I talk to find something similar. There's the sense in the aliveness that there is really a core in the trunk of the body, going up through the trunk of the body. Yeah. Which has its own kind of feeling of emptiness to it, an odd kind of emptiness. Not the emptiness of the space of awareness that's just like everything that experience is in. It's sort of like an empty room. It's alive emptiness. How can I say it? And we're sitting here, we're alive, knowing we're alive, knowing being. And rooted in that experience in some way. Though there can be all these forces of the mind that keep pulling you out of it. We'll talk about those as people notice them. All these forces pull us out of just this grounding in alive being. And I also notice there's a kind of joy right in there, intrinsic to it. Now, for instance, if you are currently depressed, you might not notice as much aliveness. If you're anxious, it might be kind of scattered or even a bit uncomfortable being in the body. There can be, fatigue. There are all sorts of things that can cloud this. Want to acknowledge that. Let's not make them into problems. Just acknowledge that. Yet even as you acknowledge, something, say, is feeling kind of dull in the body and shut down and depressed, there's the light of knowing, recognizing that. If you just recognize the light of knowing, see if there's not something that responds in the body, something of that aliveness that responds, even though you may have a lot invested in the shutdown. So the radiant core as energy is definitely a part of space and time. It does move, it does change. It is embodied. And so I want to really speak of the radiance, I guess, on these two levels, on the energetic level and on the awareness level, both in the sense of light, both in the sense of presence. Okay, I'm going to stop here and just open it up for questions and comments.